Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. When you're done watching, share this story. Someone out there might need to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. My name is Claire, and for 34 years I believed blood was thicker than water. I believed family came first, no matter what. I believed that unconditional love meant sacrifice without resentment. I was wrong about all of it. This is the story of how my brother's funeral became the day I finally stopped being the family doormat, and how one woman's greed backfired so spectacularly that even the lawyer couldn't hide his satisfaction. Let me start at the beginning. My brother Ethan and I grew up in a solidly middle-class family in Portland. Our parents worked hard. Dad was a regional sales manager. Mom was a school librarian. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Ethan was 3 years younger than me, and from the time he could walk, he was my shadow. We were genuinely close growing up. Movie nights every Friday. Inside jokes that would make us laugh until we couldn't breathe. He was my person, but something shifted when Ethan turned 18. He became obsessed with the idea of being an entrepreneur, not in the grind-it-out, build-something real way, but in the get-rich-quick, shortcut-to-success way. He dropped out of community college after one semester to chase his million-dollar idea, a cryptocurrency investment scheme that collapsed within 6 months. He lost $12,000 of Mom and Dad's money. Mom cried for days. Dad sat him down for what I'm sure was a brutal conversation, but Ethan just shrugged it off. "You have to take risks to make it big," he'd say, as if losing someone else's savings was just part of the game. I went the opposite direction. I studied accounting, graduated with honors, got my CPA license, and started working at a mid-sized firm. I wasn't flashy, but I was stable. I bought a modest condo when I was 27. I saved aggressively. I lived below my means. Ethan bounced from one failed venture to another. A food truck that lasted 3 months. A dropshipping business that got him sued for selling counterfeit goods. A consulting gig that was barely disguised multi-level marketing. Each time he'd ask the family for money to get back on his feet. Each time Mom and Dad would help him. And each time he never paid them back. When I was 30 and Ethan was 27, our parents died in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light on a rainy November evening, and just like that, they were gone. The grief was unbearable. But in the middle of that grief, there were practicalities. I handled everything: the funeral arrangements, the estate settlement, the sale of their house. Our parents left a modest inheritance, about $320,000 after everything was liquidated and debts were paid. They will split everything 50-50 between Ethan and me. I took my half, $160,000, and invested it conservatively. I used some to pay off my condo. The rest went into a diversified portfolio. I didn't touch it unless absolutely necessary. Ethan burned through his half in less than 2 years. I found out later that he'd invested $60,000 in some tech startup that immediately went under, spent another $40,000 on a luxury lifestyle to impress potential investors, and gambled away the rest in a series of increasingly desperate attempts to strike it rich. By the time he was 30, he was back to asking me for money. At first, I said no. I was angry. He'd squandered everything Mom and Dad left him while I'd carefully preserved their legacy. But Ethan knew exactly how to manipulate me. He'd call late at night, voice cracking, talking about how alone he felt without Mom and Dad, how much he missed them, how he just needed a little help to get back on track. And like an idiot, I caved. Over the next 4 years, I gave Ethan money, $1,000 here for rent, $2,000 there for a car repair, $5,000 when he claimed he was going to lose his apartment. It was never framed as a loan, but I kept meticulous records anyway. It's the accountant in me. I documented every transfer, every Venmo payment, every check. In total, I gave my brother $73,000. I never asked for it back. I told myself it was what Mom and Dad would have wanted. I told myself I was helping him because I loved him, but deep down I knew I was enabling him. Then 3 years ago, Ethan met Vanessa. Vanessa was beautiful in that calculated, high-maintenance way. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect Instagram feed. She worked as a social media consultant, which as far as I could tell meant she took pictures of herself holding products and occasionally got paid for it. Ethan was obsessed with her. Within 6 months, they were married in a courthouse ceremony. I wasn't invited. I found out about it from a Facebook post. When I confronted him, he said Vanessa wanted to keep it intimate, and that he'd been meaning to tell me. The hurt on my face must have gotten to him because he actually apologized and said we'd do a proper celebration later. We never did. After the marriage, Ethan's requests for money became more frequent, and the amounts got larger. He needed $10,000 for Vanessa's business investment. He needed $8,000 because their landlord was threatening eviction. He needed $6,000 for an emergency medical procedure Vanessa supposedly needed. I started saying no more often. And when I said no, Vanessa would call me instead. She had this sickeningly sweet voice dripping with fake gratitude. "Claire, I hate to ask, but Ethan's too proud to reach out again. We're really struggling. You're so successful, and we're barely scraping by." Family helps family, right? The guilt trips worked. I sent more money, but I also started pulling back emotionally. I stopped answering every call. I made excuses when they invited me over. The truth was, I didn't like the person my brother had become, and I really didn't like Vanessa. Then 8 months ago, Ethan called me at 2 in the morning. His voice was different, not manipulative, not desperate, just tired. "Claire, I need to tell you something," he said. "I'm sorry for everything. You've been the only person who's ever really had my back, and I've treated you like an ATM. I'm going to pay you back. I promise I'm getting my life together." I wanted to believe him so badly. We talked for over an hour that night. He told me he'd gotten a steady job as a warehouse supervisor. He said he was done chasing get-rich-quick schemes. He said Vanessa was finally working full-time at a local marketing firm. He sounded genuine. I let myself hope. Over the next few months, Ethan and I rebuilt our relationship. We started having lunch once a week. He seemed different, more grounded, more mature. He even paid me back $1,500 without me asking. It wasn't much compared to what he owed, but it felt like a turning point. Vanessa was still cold to me, but I chalked it up to embarrassment over all the times she'd asked me for money. Then on a Tuesday morning in March, I got a call from Vanessa. Ethan had collapsed at work. Massive heart attack. He was only 34 years old. By the time I got to the hospital, he was already gone. The grief was different this time. When my parents died, it was sudden, but they'd lived full lives. Ethan was my baby brother. We just started repairing things. I wasn't ready to lose him. The funeral was scheduled for the following Saturday. I handled most of the arrangements again because Vanessa claimed she was too devastated to deal with logistics. I didn't mind. Keeping busy helped me process. I paid for everything: the casket, the service, the flowers, the reception. It came to just over $18,000. I didn't ask Vanessa to contribute. Ethan was my brother. The day of the funeral arrived. The service was beautiful. Ethan's friends from work showed up. Some distant cousins, a few of Vanessa's friends who I'd never met. I gave the eulogy, barely holding it together as I talked about the brother I'd loved, the friend I'd lost too soon. After the service, we gathered at a local restaurant for the reception. That's where everything fell apart. I was standing near the buffet table, trying to force down a sandwich I didn't want, when Vanessa approached me. She was wearing an expensive black dress I was pretty sure I'd never seen before, her makeup flawless despite the occasion. "Claire, we need to talk," she said. Her voice had none of the sweetness she usually used with me. "Okay," I said cautiously. "What's going on?" "I've been thinking about Ethan's estate," she said. "Obviously, as his wife, I inherit everything. But I know you two were close, so I'm willing to be generous." I blinked at her. "Generous? I'll give you 20% of whatever is left after I settle his debts," she continued, as if she were doing me an enormous favor. It's more than you're legally entitled to, but Ethan would have wanted you to have something. My stomach dropped. Vanessa, Ethan didn't have an estate. He had credit card debt and a 12-year-old sedan. Her eyes narrowed. Don't play dumb with me. I know about your family's inheritance. Ethan told me your parents left you both hundreds of thousands of dollars. That was 7 years ago, I said slowly. And Ethan spent his share. Bullshit. Her voice rose and several people turned to look at us. Ethan told me you were rich. He said you had investments and properties and that you've been hoarding money while we struggled. My face flushed. We were at my brother's funeral, and his widow was accusing me of hoarding money in front of everyone. Vanessa, I don't know what Ethan told you, but you gave him handouts like he was a charity case, she hissed. Throwing a few $1,000s our way while you sat on hundreds of thousands. You're disgusting. I felt like I'd been slapped. I helped Ethan because I loved him, I said quietly. I gave him over $70,000 over the years because he asked for it. I never asked for anything back. 70,000, she laughed bitterly. Try again. Ethan said you never gave him more than a few hundred here and there, but I know the truth. I know your parents left you everything and cut Ethan out. My hands started shaking. That's not true. The will was split 50-50. I have the documents. Of course you'd say that. Vanessa cut me off. You've been gaslighting him for years. Well, guess what? I've already talked to a lawyer. If you withheld Ethan's rightful inheritance, I can sue you for it. Community property laws mean half of what you have is mine now. I stared at her, genuinely speechless. Behind Vanessa, I saw my Uncle Greg approaching. He'd heard the whole thing. Vanessa, he said carefully. This isn't the time or place. Stay out of this, she snapped at him. Then she turned back to me. I want to see your financial records. I want to see proof of what Mom and Dad left, and I want to see where every penny went. Mom and Dad. She called them Mom and Dad like she had any right. Something in me snapped. Fine, I said coldly. Let's do this properly. I'll have my lawyer contact you. Good, Vanessa said, her chin lifted defiantly. Because I'm not letting you get away with stealing from my husband. She walked away, leaving me standing there with tears of rage burning in my eyes. Uncle Greg squeezed my shoulder. You okay? No, I admitted. But I will be. That night I went home and pulled out every document I had, bank statements, transfer receipts, copies of my parents' will, my inheritance documentation, every single Venmo payment and check I'd written to Ethan. I organized it all chronologically and put it in a binder. Then I called my lawyer, Dennis Carlisle, first thing Monday morning. Dennis had handled my parents' estate 7 years ago. He was in his 60s, sharp as a tack, and didn't suffer fools. I explained the situation. She actually accused you of stealing at the funeral? Dennis said, his tone incredulous. In front of 40 people, I confirmed. And she wants to see financial records. She claims I withheld Ethan's inheritance and that she's entitled to it now. Dennis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Claire, do you want my advice as your lawyer or as someone who knew your family? Both. As your lawyer, I'll tell you that she has absolutely no case. Your parents' will is ironclad and you have documentation of everything. As someone who knew your family, he paused. Bury her. I'd never heard Dennis sound vindictive before. What do you mean? I asked. Vanessa has made a very public accusation of financial fraud. If you want, we can respond quietly and make this go away. Or he paused meaningfully. We can call her bluff and force her to prove her claims in front of a mediator or, if it comes to it, a judge. Given that you have documentation and she has nothing but hearsay from a deceased spouse, it won't end well for her. How not well? I asked. If she pursues this and loses, she could be liable for your legal fees, and depending on how aggressive she gets, we could countersue for defamation. She made these accusations publicly, after all. I thought about Vanessa's sneer. The way she'd called me disgusting at my brother's funeral. Let's call her bluff, I said. Dennis sent Vanessa a formal letter requiring her to provide evidence of her claims before he would turn over any of my financial documentation. As expected, she couldn't provide anything except Ethan told me. But Vanessa didn't back down. Instead, She hired a lawyer, some ambulance chaser she probably found online, and demanded a formal estate mediation. Fine. I'd play. The mediation was scheduled for 6 weeks after the funeral. In the meantime, Vanessa started a smear campaign. She posted on Facebook about how her wealthy sister-in-law had abandoned Ethan and was now trying to keep his rightful inheritance. She tagged me in posts claiming I was heartless and greedy. I didn't respond. Dennis told me to document everything but stay silent. Friends started reaching out, confused. I gave them all the same response. There's been a misunderstanding. It'll be cleared up soon. The day of the mediation arrived. We met at Dennis's office, a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows. Vanessa showed up with her lawyer, a man named Ron Patchett, who looked like he handled personal injury cases and not estate law. The mediator, a woman named Angela Rowe, walked us through the process. Each side would present their case, and she'd help us reach a resolution. Vanessa went first. My husband, Ethan, told me repeatedly that his family inheritance was mishandled. She began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. He said his sister Claire controlled everything after their parents died and that she refused to give him his fair share. He was forced to live in poverty while she hoarded hundreds of thousands of dollars. I bit my tongue. Patchett jumped in. We believe that Mrs. Claire Mitchell, he got my name wrong, it's still my maiden name, Donovan, violated her fiduciary duty as executor of the estate and withheld assets from my client's late husband. We're seeking a full accounting and restitution. Angela turned to me. Ms. Donovan, your response? Dennis opened his binder. This is very simple. Ms. Donovan's parents left a will that divided their estate equally between their 2 children. Here is a certified copy of that will, probated in Multnomah County in 2018. He slid it across the table. Ethan received $160,000. Here are the bank records showing the transfer to his account. Another document. Ethan spent that money over the next 2 years. Here are his bank statements showing the expenditures. More documents. I saw Vanessa's face pale. Furthermore, Dennis continued, Ms. Donovan provided substantial financial support to her brother over the next several years. Here is a complete record of every payment she made to Ethan, $73,000 in total. He placed a thick stack of printed statements and receipts on the table. Ms. Donovan asked for nothing in return. She helped her brother because she loved him. For Mrs. Moore to now claim that Ms. Donovan withheld anything is not only false, it's defamatory. The room was silent. Angela flipped through the documents. After a long moment, she looked at Vanessa. Mrs. Moore, do you have any evidence to support your claim that your late husband was entitled to additional assets? Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. Patchett shuffled his papers nervously. Ethan told me Vanessa started. Do you have documentation? Angela interrupted. Bank records, correspondence, anything that shows Ms. Donovan withheld assets. He told me she was rich, Vanessa said, her voice rising. He said she had investments and properties and that she never helped us. She gave you $73,000, Angela said flatly. That's documented right here. That's, Vanessa sputtered. That's not enough. The words hung in the air. Dennis leaned forward. Not enough. Ms. Donovan gave your husband more than 60% of what he originally inherited on top of his own share. She paid for his funeral. She supported him emotionally and financially for years, and you have the audacity to claim it's not enough. Vanessa's face turned red. He was broke, we were broke, and she was sitting on all that money. Because she didn't spend her inheritance recklessly, Dennis said coldly. Ms. Donovan made responsible financial decisions. Your husband did not. That's not her fault. Patchett tried to recover. With all due respect, Mr. Carlisle, my client has suffered a tremendous loss. So has mine, Dennis cut him off. Ms. Donovan lost her brother, and at his funeral your client publicly accused her of theft and fraud. We're not here because Mrs. Moore has a legitimate claim. We're here because she's fishing for money she's not entitled to. Angela set down her pen. Mrs. Moore, based on the evidence presented, you have no legal claim to any additional assets. The estate was properly distributed 7 years ago. Your husband spent his inheritance. Ms. Donovan has no obligation to provide you with anything. But Vanessa started. Furthermore, Angela continued, if you pursue this matter in court, you will almost certainly lose, and you may be liable for Ms. Donovan's legal fees. I strongly recommend you withdraw your claim. Vanessa looked at Patchett desperately. He cleared his throat. Perhaps we were misinformed about the situation. You were lied to, I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken. Everyone looked at me. Ethan lied to you, Vanessa, I continued. I don't know why. Maybe he was embarrassed that he'd burned through his inheritance. Maybe he wanted you to think his family was the reason you were struggling. But I never withheld anything from him. I gave him everything I could. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or manipulative. I loved my brother, I said, my voice cracking. And I wanted to help him, but you didn't come to me after he died to grieve with me or to share memories. You came demanding money at his funeral. Vanessa looked away. Dennis spoke up. We're prepared to accept Mrs. Moore's withdrawal of all claims in exchange for Ms. Donovan agreeing not to pursue a defamation suit for the public accusations made at the funeral and on social media. It was more generous than. Vanessa deserved, and we both knew it. Patchett whispered something to Vanessa. She nodded stiffly. My client withdraws her claim, Patchett said. Angela drafted a settlement agreement on the spot. Both sides signed. As we stood to leave, Vanessa finally looked at me. Did he really spend it all? Yes, I said simply. He told me you never helped us. I know. She shook her head, her expression somewhere between bitter and broken. I can't believe he lied to me. I can't believe you accused me of stealing at his funeral, I replied. We left it at that. 3 months have passed since the mediation. Vanessa moved out of state. I heard through Uncle Greg that she went back to live with her parents in Arizona. She deleted all her social media posts about me, though the damage to some of my relationships had already been done. Spent a lot of time thinking about Ethan, about the choices he made, the lies he told, the person he became. I'm angry at him for lying to Vanessa about me. I'm angry that he spent years manipulating me for money. I'm angry that his death was the catalyst for me to finally see how toxic our relationship had become. But I also miss him. I miss the brother he was before the greed took over. I miss the person he could have been if he'd made different choices. I've started therapy to work through it all. My therapist says I was codependent, that I enabled Ethan's behavior because I was afraid of losing him. She's probably right. I've also started setting boundaries in other areas of my life. I've cut off a few distant relatives who reached out asking for small loans after hearing about the mediation. I've learned to say no without guilt. The hardest part is accepting that I can't save people who don't want to save themselves. I gave Ethan over $70,000, and it didn't change anything. He spent it just like he spent his inheritance. The problem was never the amount of money he had, it was his relationship. With money itself, I still have the binder of documents from the mediation in my office. Sometimes I pull it out and flip through it, looking at all those Venmo transfers and checks. Proof that I tried, proof that I loved him, but also proof that love isn't always enough. I've thought about what I'd say to Ethan if I could talk to him one more time. I'd tell him I forgive him for the lies and the manipulation. I'd tell him I'm sorry I couldn't help him become the person he wanted to be. But I'd also tell him that I'm done carrying his weight. I'm done being the family doormat, and I'm done letting guilt dictate my decisions. Vanessa taught me something important that day at the funeral, even if she didn't mean to. Some people will take everything you give them and still demand more. And when you finally say no, they'll paint you as the villain. I'm okay with being the villain in Vanessa's story. Because in my own story, I'm finally learning to be the protagonist, someone who sets boundaries, who protects herself, who doesn't sacrifice everything for people who won't do the same in return. If there's a lesson in all of this, It's that you can't love someone into changing. You can't give them enough money to fix their problems. And you certainly can't let their dysfunction become your identity. Ethan made his choices. I made mine, and I have to live with both. The last time I visited Ethan's grave, I brought flowers and sat there for a long time. I told him about the mediation, about Vanessa leaving, about everything that had happened since he died. I told him I loved him, and then I told him goodbye. Not goodbye forever, but goodbye to the version of our relationship where I set myself on fire to keep him warm. Goodbye to the guilt that kept me giving when I should have been protecting myself. I stood up, brushed the grass off my jeans, and walked back to my car. And for the first time in years, I felt light.